I never thought my own children would dump me like yesterday's garbage. But what they didn't know was that I still held all the cards. Get ready, because what you're about to hear is not just a story, it's a reckoning. Comment below where you're watching from and don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this. My name is Margaret Sullivan, and at 73, I thought I'd seen everything life could throw at me. I was wrong. Dead wrong. The morning that changed everything started like any other Tuesday in my beautiful colonial home in Westchester County, New York. The same house where I'd raised 3 children, buried my husband of 45 years, and planned to spend my final days surrounded by family photographs and memories. I was watering my prized roses when I heard the car doors slam. 3 vehicles. Expensive ones. My heart should have leaped with joy seeing all my children arrive together, but something felt different. Cold. Clinical. Like they were coming to conduct business, not visit their mother. "Mom, we need to talk," announced my eldest, Richard, straightening his designer suit. Behind him stood my daughter Patricia, clutching her Hermes purse like a weapon, and my youngest, Michael, avoiding eye contact completely. They filed into my living room like a board of directors, not the babies I'd sacrificed everything for. "What's this about?" I asked, settling into my favorite armchair, the one Harold bought me for our 20th anniversary. The leather was worn but comfortable, like our marriage had been. Richard cleared his throat. "Mom, we've made a decision." "A decision?" I repeated, my voice barely above a whisper. The way they were positioned, Richard standing like a prosecutor, Patricia perched on the edge of the sofa like she might flee, and Michael studying his expensive shoes, made my stomach clench with dread. "About your living situation," Patricia chimed in, her voice artificially bright. "We've found you a wonderful place. Sunset Manor. It's for the best, Mom." The words hit me like a physical blow. "A nursing home? You want to put me in a nursing home?" I stood up, my hands trembling. "I'm perfectly capable of taking care of myself. I drive, I cook, I maintain this entire house." "That's just it, Mom," Michael finally spoke, his voice barely audible. "This house is too much for you. Too big, too expensive to maintain. You're 73 years old. And you're 45, yet I still do your laundry when you visit," I snapped back, but immediately regretted the sharpness. These were my children. The babies I'd nursed through fevers, the toddlers whose scraped knees I'd kissed, the teenagers whose hearts I'd mended. Richard pulled out a folder, thick with documents. "We've already put down a deposit. You move in Friday." Friday. 3 days away. 3 days to pack up 73 years of life, 45 years of marriage, and 50 years in this house. "What about my house?" I asked, though I was beginning to suspect the answer. "Don't worry about that," Patricia said, not meeting my eyes. "We'll handle everything." Handle everything? I felt my voice rising, but I couldn't control it. "This is my home. Harold and I bought this house in 1974. We raised you here. Your father died in that bedroom upstairs, and you want to just handle it?" Richard's face hardened. "Mom, be realistic. You can't afford to maintain a 4-bedroom house on Dad's pension and Social Security. The property taxes alone are killing you. We're doing you a favor." "A favor?" The word tasted bitter. "And I suppose you 3 have generously volunteered to take over the burden of this house?" The silence stretched between us like a chasm. Patricia fidgeted with her wedding ring, the one that cost more than my car. Michael suddenly became fascinated with his phone. Richard just stared at me with that cold, calculating look he'd perfected as a corporate lawyer. The house will be sold, he said finally. The proceeds will help pay for your care. But something in his tone, the way he couldn't quite meet my eyes, told me everything I needed to know. You've already decided who's buying it, haven't you? Patricia and James are prepared to make a fair offer. Fair? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Your sister is going to buy my house? At what price? Half of market value? A quarter. Patricia's face flushed red. Mom, that's not fair. We're family. We'd take care of it, keep it in the family. For what, Patricia? So you can flip it in 5 years for double what you paid. The look that passed between my 3 children confirmed every suspicion. They'd planned this. Orchestrated it. My own flesh and blood had conspired to warehouse me and steal my most valuable asset. The next morning, I sat in my kitchen, staring at the coffee mug Harold had given me on our last Christmas together. World's best mom, it said in faded blue letters. I wondered if he was rolling in his grave, watching his children prove that sentiment wrong. Patricia arrived with boxes and packing tape, her movements efficient and businesslike. I brought some supplies, Mom. I thought we could start with your bedroom, then work our way through the house. How thoughtful of you to help me erase 50 years of memories, I said, not bothering to hide my bitterness. She paused, tape dispenser in hand. Mom, please don't make this harder than it has to be. We're doing what's best for everyone. Everyone? Or just for your bank accounts? Patricia set down the tape with more force than necessary. That's not fair, Mom. Do you think this is easy for us? Do you think we want to see you in a nursing home? I studied my daughter's face, searching for some trace of the little girl who used to crawl into my lap during thunderstorms. Then why are you doing it? Because you fell last month. Because you forgot to turn off the stove twice in 1 week. Because Mrs. Henderson next door called Richard worried about you wandering around the garden at midnight in your nightgown. I had forgotten about that. The insomnia had been getting worse since Harold died, and sometimes I found solace in my garden during the quiet hours when sleep wouldn't come. 1 incident. 3 incidents, Mom. And those are just the ones we know about. Friday morning arrived gray and drizzling, as if the weather itself mourned what was happening. The van from Sunset Manor sat in my driveway like a hearse, waiting to transport me from my life to my exile. I'd packed 3 suitcases. 3 suitcases to represent 73 years of living. The rest of my belongings were being assorted through by my children, though I suspected most would end up in donation bins or dumpsters. Richard handled the paperwork with the nursing home staff, his signature bold and confident on documents that signed away my independence. Patricia supervised the loading of my few possessions, directing the workers like she was staging a photo shoot rather than dismantling her mother's life. Michael couldn't even look at me. He stood by his BMW, checking his phone every few minutes, clearly wanting to be anywhere else. Ready, Mrs. Sullivan? Asked the nursing home attendant, a kind-faced woman named Janet who spoke to me like I was a child being dropped off at daycare. I took one last look at my house, my sanctuary, my home. The place where I'd celebrated birthdays and anniversaries, where I'd nursed sick children and welcomed grandchildren, where I'd held Harold's hand as he took his last breath. As ready as anyone can be for their own funeral, I replied. Janet's smile faltered slightly, but she maintained her professional cheerfulness. Oh, Mrs. Sullivan, you'll love Sunset Manor. We have bingo on Wednesdays and movie nights on Fridays. Bingo and movie nights. The thrilling highlights of my remaining years. As the van pulled away from my house, I saw Patricia and James walking up the front steps, keys already in hand. Sunset Manor smelled like disinfectant masquerading as flowers, with an underlying scent of boiled vegetables and human resignation. My room was 12 feet by 10 feet, decorated in the kind of cheerful pastels that were supposed to make you forget you were waiting to die. "This is lovely," I lied to Janet, who was showing me around with the enthusiasm of a cruise director. "And here's your roommate, Mrs. Chen," Janet announced, gesturing toward an elderly Asian woman sitting by the window, staring out at the parking lot. Mrs. Chen looked up briefly, nodded politely, and returned to her vigil by the window. I would soon learn that she spent most of her time there, watching for family members who visited less and less frequently. "Now, Mrs. Sullivan, let's get you settled. Dinner is at 5:30, and tonight is meatloaf night." Janet's voice had that artificial perkiness that made me want to scream. After she left, I unpacked my 3 suitcases in silence. My favorite sweater, the one Harold said made my eyes look like emeralds. A few photographs in cheap frames. My jewelry box, though most of my good pieces had mysteriously gone missing during the packing process. And at the bottom of my largest suitcase, wrapped in my wedding dress, was my most precious possession. The deed to my house. The deed that was still in my name and Harold's name. The deed that my children had never bothered to ask about, assuming in their greed and haste that I'd simply hand over everything without question. I smiled for the first time in days. My children thought they were so clever, so sophisticated. Richard with his law degree, Patricia with her MBA, Michael with his computer programming skills. But they'd all forgotten one crucial thing. I wasn't just their mother. I was Harold Sullivan's widow, and Harold Sullivan had been the smartest man I'd ever known. That night, after the dinner of gray meatloaf and overcooked green beans, I lay in my narrow bed listening to Mrs. Chen's gentle snoring and planning my next move. The deed was just the beginning. Harold and I had been meticulous about our financial planning, despite what my children assumed. The next morning, I called my old neighbor, Eleanor Martinez, from the pay phone in the Sunset Manor lobby. "Margaret. How are you settling in, dear?" Eleanor's voice was warm with genuine concern. "Eleanor, I need a favor. Could you drive me to the bank tomorrow? I need to take care of some business." "Of course, honey. Is everything all right?" I glanced around the lobby, making sure none of the staff were within earshot. Let's just say my children may have underestimated their old mother. Eleanor picked me up at 10 the next morning, her ancient Honda Civic a welcome sight after 3 days of institutional beige walls and fluorescent lighting. As we drove toward downtown Westchester, I felt my strength returning with each mile away from Sunset Manor. At First National Bank, I met with Harold's old friend, James Morrison, who'd handled our mortgage for 30 years. "Margaret, I was so sorry to hear about your situation," James said, his weathered face creased with concern. "Your children seemed very decisive about the arrangements. James, I need you to pull all the documentation on the house. The original deed, the mortgage papers, everything. And I need to know exactly who has legal authority to make decisions about that property." James disappeared into the vault, returning 20 minutes later with a thick folder. As he spread the documents across his desk, I felt my heart racing. There it was, in black and white. The house was held in joint tenancy with rights of survivorship between Harold and me. Upon Harold's death, I became the sole owner. "James, according to this, I'm the only person who can legally sell that house, correct?" "That's right, Margaret. These documents would hold up in any court." I called Richard from James Morrison's office, using the banker's phone with his permission. "Mom? How did you get this number?" "I'm in a meeting." "Richard, we need to talk." "About the house." Mom, we've been through this. Patricia and James will take good care of it. You don't need to worry about these things anymore. I could hear the condescension in his voice, the way he spoke to me like I was a child who couldn't understand grown-up matters. Richard, have you signed any papers yet? Made any offers? Mom, that's not your concern anymore. You need to focus on adjusting to your new life. Answer the question, Richard. There was a pause. I could hear him shuffling papers, probably trying to multitask while dealing with his inconvenient mother. If you must know, we're meeting with the realtor this afternoon. Patricia and James are prepared to make an offer that's very fair, considering the circumstances. What circumstances would those be? Well, the house needs work, Mom. The roof, the heating system, the kitchen is outdated. We're basically doing you a favor by taking it off your hands. I felt a cold fury settle in my chest. How generous of you, son. Mom, I have to go. We'll talk later. He hung up before I could respond. I stared at the phone for a moment, then looked up at James Morrison, who had been pretending not to listen. James, I need you to do something for me. I need you to call that realtor and inform them that any sale of 1247 Maple Street requires the signature of the legal owner, Margaret Sullivan, and that I have not authorized any sale. James smiled. It would be my pleasure, Margaret. And James? I need you to make one more call for me. Eleanor drove me to downtown White Plains, where I had an appointment with Sarah Chen, Esquire, Mrs. Chen's granddaughter from the nursing home, and coincidentally, one of the top elder law attorneys in Westchester County. Sarah was nothing like her quiet grandmother. She was sharp, direct, and clearly inherited her family's intelligence along with their determination. Mrs. Sullivan, my grandmother told me about your situation. She's very fond of you already, by the way. She says you're the first roommate who doesn't talk about her ailments all day. Despite everything, I smiled. Your grandmother is a lovely woman. And she's clearly raised a remarkable family. Sarah opened a legal pad and pulled out a digital recorder. Now, tell me everything. From the beginning. And don't leave out any details, no matter how small they seem. For the next hour, I laid out everything. The sudden decision to move me to the nursing home, the rush to handle my house, the way my children had dismissed my concerns and treated me like I was incompetent. Sarah took notes, occasionally asking pointed questions about dates, conversations, and documents. Mrs. Sullivan, do you have any medical documentation about your mental competency? Any diagnosis of dementia or cognitive impairment? None. My doctor, Dr. Williams, has never suggested any such thing. I had my annual physical just 2 months ago. Clean bill of health except for some arthritis. Sarah smiled. Good. Now, about your financial situation. Your children claimed you couldn't afford to maintain the house. I reached into my purse and pulled out a folder James Morrison had prepared for me. Harold was an accountant, Miss Chen. We were very careful with our money. Between his pension, my Social Security, and our savings, I was managing just fine. Sarah reviewed the financial documents, her eyebrows rising slightly. Mrs. Sullivan, you're actually quite well off. Why did your children think you were struggling financially? Because I live modestly. Always have. Harold and I learned during the Depression that you save for the future and don't flash your money around. My children assumed that because I drive an old car and shop at discount stores, I must be poor. When in reality, you were just being smart with your money. Exactly. Over the next week, I established my routine at Sunset Manor while Sarah Chen worked behind the scenes. I attended the activities, bingo on Wednesday, movie night on Friday, and slowly got to know the other residents. Many of them had stories similar to mine, children who'd grown impatient with aging parents and found it easier to warehouse them than deal with the inconvenience of family caregiving. But unlike most of my fellow residents, I had resources. I had documentation. And now, I had a plan. Sarah called me Thursday evening with an update. "Mrs. Sullivan, your children have been very busy. They've had the house appraised, at suspiciously low value, and Patricia has made an offer through her husband's real estate company. They're planning to close next Friday. Without my signature? They seem to believe they have power of attorney over your affairs. Richard has been telling the realtor that you're mentally incompetent and that he's handling your business matters." The betrayal cut deeper than I'd expected. Not only were they stealing my house, they were destroying my reputation and spreading lies about my mental state. "Sarah, what do we do?" "We let them get as far into this as possible. Let them sign papers, make plans, maybe even start making improvements to the house. The deeper they dig this hole, the more spectacular their fall will be. And in the meantime? In the meantime, you document everything. Every conversation, every visit, every assumption they make about your incompetence. We're going to need all of it." Friday morning, Patricia visited me at Sunset Manor, bringing me a small bouquet of carnations from the grocery store. "How are you adjusting, Mom?" she asked, settling into the visitor's chair with obvious discomfort. "Oh, you know. Learning to play bingo and pretend to enjoy Jell-O salad." Patricia laughed, but it sounded forced. "Mom, I have some good news. We've found a buyer for the house." "How wonderful. I hope they'll be happy there." "Actually, Mom, James and I are buying it. We want to keep it in the family." I kept my face carefully neutral. "That's very thoughtful, dear. What did you offer?" Patricia shifted uncomfortably in her chair. "Well, the house needs significant work, Mom. The inspection revealed some issues with the foundation, and the electrical system is outdated. We're offering $350,000. I nearly choked. The house had been appraised just 2 years ago at $650,000 for insurance purposes. Even with needed repairs, it was worth at least $500,000 in the current market. $350? That seems low. Mom, we're taking a big risk here. Old houses are money pits. We're basically doing this as a favor to you, to make sure the house stays in the family." "How generous of you and James." Patricia missed the sarcasm entirely. "Richard handled all the paperwork. You don't need to worry about any of the legal stuff. We know how confusing it can be." After Patricia left, I called Sarah Chen immediately. $350,000? Sarah's voice was sharp with anger. "Mrs. Sullivan, that's highway robbery. Your house is worth nearly twice that amount." "I know. Harold and I had it appraised recently for estate planning purposes." "Perfect. Do you have those appraisal documents?" "Harold kept everything." "Sarah, how long do we let this continue?" "Until the closing. Let them show up at the lawyer's office with their cashier's check and their moving plans. Let them believe they've won. Then we'll show them what real legal representation looks like." That weekend, I watched from Mrs. Chen's window as a moving truck pulled up to my house. Patricia and James were already moving their belongings in, acting like they owned the place. I saw them directing movers, pointing to different rooms, clearly planning their new life in the house where I'd raised my children and buried my husband. Mrs. Chen joined me at the window. "Your family?" she asked in her soft, accented English. My daughter and her husband. They think they're very clever. Ah. Mrs. Chen nodded knowingly. My son also think he very clever. Take my restaurant, put me here. Say I too old to run business. What happened to your restaurant? Mrs. Chen smiled for the first time since I'd known her. Still mine. Son, find out soon. The following week, Sarah Chen visited me at Sunset Manor with updates that made my heart race with anticipation and righteous anger. Mrs. Sullivan, your children have been very busy. Richard has opened a joint checking account using forged documents claiming power of attorney. Patricia and James have already started renovating the kitchen, spending nearly $30,000 on upgrades. And Michael has been telling people at his office that his mother has dementia and the family had to take control of her affairs. Forged documents? Richard created a power of attorney document and backdated it, claiming you signed it before entering Sunset Manor. The signature is clearly not yours. I had a handwriting expert examine it. I felt a cold rage settle in my bones. My own son forged my signature? It gets worse. They've also filed paperwork to have you declared mentally incompetent, using Dr. Williams' name without his knowledge or permission. But Dr. Williams would never. He didn't. They forged his signature too. Dr. Williams is furious. He's prepared to testify on your behalf about your perfect mental health. Sarah opened her briefcase and pulled out a thick folder. Mrs. Sullivan, we have enough evidence to file criminal charges for fraud, forgery, and elder abuse. But I think our civil case will be much more satisfying. What do you mean? Your children have committed several felonies, but more importantly for our purposes, they've also opened themselves up to massive civil liability. We can sue them for damages, emotional distress, and punitive damages. Plus, every dollar they've spent on their house improvements becomes our recovery. I stared out the window at the parking lot, thinking about my children as babies, as young adults starting their careers, as the successful people they'd become. How had I raised children capable of such cruelty and betrayal? Sarah, what would Harold do? From what you've told me about your husband, I think Harold would want justice. Not revenge, but justice. Then let's get them justice. Sarah's plan was elegant in its simplicity. We would let my children proceed with their fraudulent scheme until they were completely committed, financially and legally. Then we would spring the trap at the worst possible moment for them, and the best possible moment for maximum impact. The closing is scheduled for Friday at 2 p.m. at Morrison & Associates, Sarah informed me during our Wednesday meeting. They'll show up with their cashier's check for $350,000, expecting to walk away with the deed to your house. Instead, they'll find you there with the real owner's deed, a forensic accountant's report on the true value of the house, and a very detailed lawsuit claiming damages in excess of $1 million. The thought of seeing their faces when reality crashed down on them filled me with a satisfaction I hadn't felt since Harold's death. Sarah, there's one more thing I want. What's that? I want to move back into my house. I want them evicted, and I want to go home. Sarah smiled. Mrs. Sullivan, that can absolutely be arranged. In fact, since they're essentially squatters who broke into your house and moved in without permission, we can have the sheriff escort them out immediately after the confrontation. Thursday evening, Patricia called me at Sunset Manor. Mom, I just wanted to let you know that everything goes through tomorrow with the house. You don't need to worry about anything, we've handled all the details. That's wonderful, dear. I'm so grateful to have children who take such good care of me. We love you, Mom. We just want what's best for you. After I hung up, Mrs. Chen looked at me with something that might have been admiration. Tomorrow, they learn, she asked. Tomorrow, they learn. Mrs. Chen smiled her quiet smile. Good. My granddaughter, she very smart lawyer. She fix everything. Friday morning, I dressed carefully for what I knew would be the most important confrontation of my life. I chose my best navy blue suit, the one Harold had bought me for our 40th anniversary, and pinned on the pearl brooch that had been his mother's. I looked in the mirror and saw not a discarded old woman, but Margaret Sullivan, homeowner, mother, and survivor. Sarah picked me up at noon, her car filled with boxes of legal documents, evidence folders, and a team of paralegals who would be serving papers on my children immediately after the confrontation. Are you ready for this, Mrs. Sullivan? Sarah asked as we drove toward the lawyer's office. I've been ready for this since the day they dumped me at Sunset Manor and drove away without looking back. Morrison and Associates occupied a beautiful old Victorian house converted into offices, with rich wood paneling and leather furniture that spoke of tradition and stability. Harold and I had done our estate planning here 20 years earlier with James Morrison's father. We arrived early and positioned ourselves in the conference room. Sarah arranged her documents strategically around the table, creating an imposing display of legal firepower. A court reporter sat quietly in the corner, ready to document everything for the record. At exactly 2 p.m., I heard familiar voices in the hallway. Richard's confident baritone, Patricia's nervous giggling, and Michael's sullen mumbling. The sound of their footsteps approaching filled me with an anticipation I hadn't felt in years. The door opened, and my 3 children walked in, followed by James and their real estate agent, a nervous-looking woman clutching a folder of closing documents. The moment they saw me sitting at the head of the conference table, their faces went through a symphony of emotions. Confusion, followed by irritation, followed by the dawning realization that something was very, very wrong. Mom. Richard's voice cracked slightly. What are you doing here? I smiled at my eldest son, the boy I'd nursed through pneumonia when he was 7, the young man I'd helped through law school with every spare dollar Harold and I could scrape together. Hello, Richard. Patricia. Michael. I'm here for the closing, of course. It is my house we're discussing, after all. The silence in the room was deafening. Richard's face had gone pale, Patricia clutched her purse like a shield, and Michael looked like he wanted to disappear through the floor. Their real estate agent looked around the table with growing confusion. I'm sorry, she said hesitantly, but there seems to be some confusion. Mr. Sullivan, you said your mother had given you power of attorney to handle this transaction. Richard's Adam's apple bobbed as he swallowed hard. There must be some misunderstanding. Mom, you're supposed to be at Sunset Manor. This doesn't concern you anymore. I reached across the table and pulled the deed from Sarah's folder, spreading it out where everyone could see it. Actually, Richard, this concerns me very much. You see, this is the deed to 1247 Maple Street. Notice whose name is on it. Patricia leaned forward, squinting at the document. That can't be right. You signed the house over to us. Richard handled the paperwork. Did I, Patricia? When exactly did I sign anything? Richard was fumbling through his briefcase, pulling out documents with increasing desperation. Mom, you're confused. You signed the power of attorney before you moved to the nursing home. I have it right here. You mean this power of attorney? Sarah asked sweetly, sliding another document across the table. The one with the forged signature that doesn't match any other document your mother has ever signed in her 73 years of life. The real estate agent stood up abruptly. I think there's been a mistake. I'm going to need to consult with my broker. Please sit down, Sarah said firmly. You'll want to hear this. I looked at each of my children's faces, these people I had given my life to, who had repaid my love with betrayal and theft. Did you really think I was so stupid, so helpless, that I wouldn't notice you stealing my house? Mom, we weren't stealing, Michael began. Then what would you call moving into someone else's house without their permission? What would you call forging legal documents? What would you call having your own mother declared mentally incompetent when she's perfectly healthy? Patricia's face crumpled. Mom, we were trying to help you. The house was too much for you to handle alone. Help me. My voice rose despite my efforts to stay calm. By lying to me? By stealing from me? By destroying my reputation and spreading rumors about my mental health? Sarah opened the first box of documents with theatrical precision. Mrs. Sullivan's children have been very busy these past few weeks. Let me show you exactly what they've been up to. She pulled out a stack of papers and began laying them out like cards in a game of solitaire. Exhibit A, forged power of attorney documents. Exhibit B, fraudulent medical assessment claiming Mrs. Sullivan has dementia, signed by a doctor who never examined her and whose signature was forged. Exhibit C, fraudulent real estate listing using forged authorization. Richard's face was now bright red. This is ridiculous. Mom, you're clearly not well. You can't possibly handle living alone anymore. Really, Richard? I stood up, feeling stronger than I had in months. Let me tell you what I can't handle. I can't handle children who lie to me. I can't handle being treated like a burden when I raised you with every ounce of love in my heart. I can't handle watching you steal my home while pretending you're doing me a favor. Sarah continued her presentation. Exhibit D, financial records showing Mrs. Sullivan is perfectly capable of maintaining her home. Her savings, pension, and Social Security provide more than adequate income. Exhibit E, medical records from Dr. Williams confirming Mrs. Sullivan is in excellent mental health with no signs of cognitive impairment. Patricia was crying now, mascara running down her cheeks. Mom, we were scared. You fell, you forgot about the stove. I fell once, Patricia. Once. And I forgot to turn off the stove twice in 1 week when I was grieving your father's death. That hardly makes me incompetent. But the wandering around at night. I was gardening, Patricia. In my own garden. On my own property. Since when is that a crime? Michael finally found his voice. Mom, even if we made some mistakes, we were trying to do what was best. Mistakes? Sarah interrupted. Mr. Sullivan, your mistakes constitute multiple felonies. Forgery, fraud, elder abuse, and theft. The district attorney is very interested in your case. The real estate agent was backing toward the door. I think I need to leave. This transaction is clearly fraudulent, Sarah finished. Yes, it is. And as the agent who accepted forged listing documents, you might want to consult with your attorney as well. I watched my children's world collapse around them, and for the first time in months, I felt truly powerful. Not vindictive, powerful. There's a difference. Sarah, please show them the rest. Sarah smiled and opened the second box. Mrs. Sullivan's children didn't just commit fraud, they also made some very expensive assumptions. Patricia and James, you've spent $37,000 renovating someone else's house without permission. That constitutes improvements to Mrs. Sullivan's property, which legally belong to her now. James spoke for the first time, his voice barely audible. The kitchen renovation, the new appliances. All belong to Mrs. Sullivan. along with the new hardwood floors you installed in the living room, the updated bathroom fixtures, and the fresh paint throughout the house. Richard was frantically scribbling notes on a legal pad. Mom, surely we can work this out. Family shouldn't sue family. We can negotiate. Like you negotiated with me before dumping me in a nursing home? I asked. Like you negotiated before forging my signature and stealing my house? We thought you'd be happier at Sunset Manor. You thought it would be easier for you if I was out of the way. There's a difference, Richard. Sarah pulled out another folder. Speaking of Sunset Manor, let's talk about the cost of Mrs. Sullivan's unnecessary institutionalization. Sunset Manor charges $4,000 per month. Mrs. Sullivan has been there for 3 weeks, but you plan to keep her there permanently. We're calculating damages based on the average nursing home stay of 2 years. Patricia looked up through her tears. Damages. $96,000 for nursing home costs that wouldn't have been necessary if you hadn't committed fraud. Plus pain and suffering damages for the emotional distress of being torn from her home and institutionalized against her will. Plus punitive damages for the deliberate nature of your actions. I could see Richard's lawyer brain working, calculating numbers and outcomes. What are you asking for? Sarah smiled. We're not asking for anything. We're telling you what's going to happen. Mrs. Sullivan is moving back into her house today. You have 24 hours to remove your belongings. Any property improvements you made remain with the house, as they were done without the owner's permission. And the criminal charges? Michael asked quietly. That depends on your cooperation, Sarah replied. Mrs. Sullivan is willing to accept restitution instead of jail time, but only if you make this right immediately. I had dreamed of this moment for weeks, but now that it was here, I felt more sadness than satisfaction. These were my children, the babies I'd carried, the toddlers I'd chased around this very building when they were small and we were meeting with Harold's insurance agent. Here are my terms, I said, my voice steady despite the storm of emotions raging inside me. You will publicly acknowledge that I am mentally competent and fully capable of managing my own affairs. You will make a formal apology to Dr. Williams for forging his signature. You will pay restitution for all costs associated with my nursing home stay, that's $12,000 so far. Richard was writing furiously. What else? You will never again attempt to control my finances, my living situation, or my medical decisions without my explicit written consent. And you will attend family counseling with me to address the deep betrayal of trust that brought us to this room. Patricia looked up, hope flickering in her eyes. Family counseling? Did you think I'd just cut you out of my life forever, Patricia? You're still my children, despite what you've done. But if we're going to have any relationship going forward, we need to rebuild it on honesty and respect. Michael was crying now, tears streaming down his face. Mom, I'm so sorry. I never wanted this to happen. I told Richard it was wrong. But you went along with it anyway, I said firmly. You stood in my living room and let your brother railroad me into a nursing home. You helped pack up my life like I was already dead. I know, and I hate myself for it. Sarah cleared her throat. There's one more condition, Mrs. Sullivan. I nodded. My children will establish a trust fund for elder advocacy. $100,000 to help other seniors who don't have the resources to fight back when their families try to steal from them or warehouse them against their will. The room fell silent. Richard's pen had stopped moving. Patricia stared at me with something that might have been respect for the first time in years. $100,000? Richard whispered. 2 hours later, I walked up the front steps of 1247 Maple Street for the first time in 3 weeks. Sarah's paralegal had served the eviction notice, and the sheriff's deputy stood by politely as Patricia and James loaded their belongings into a U-Haul truck. The house smelled different, like fresh paint and new carpet, mixed with the lingering scent of Patricia's expensive perfume. But underneath it all, I could still smell home. I could still smell Harold's coffee brewing in the kitchen, still hear the echoes of my children's laughter from when they were young and innocent and believed their mother could fix anything. "The new kitchen is beautiful," I told Patricia as she packed dishes that had belonged to her grandmother. "You have excellent taste." Patricia looked up, surprised by the compliment. "Mom, I want you to know, we really did think we were helping. I know that sounds stupid now, but we were scared. When Dad died, you seemed so lost, and we didn't know how to help. So you decided to eliminate the problem instead of addressing it? We were wrong. We were so wrong." Patricia sat down heavily at my kitchen table, the same table where I'd helped her with homework, where we'd planned her wedding, where Harold and I had shared our morning coffee for 45 years. "Patricia, fear doesn't excuse cruelty. And laziness doesn't excuse theft." Laziness? It would have been hard work to actually help me process my grief, to support me while I figured out how to live without your father. It was easier to just put me somewhere and forget about me. Patricia was crying again, but these tears seemed different. Cleaner somehow. "How do we fix this, Mom? How do we earn your trust back?" I looked around my kitchen, at the new granite countertops and stainless steel appliances my daughter had installed with money meant to steal my house. "We start with honesty, Patricia. Complete honesty. No more making decisions for me without asking. No more assuming I'm incompetent because I'm old. And no more treating me like a burden instead of a person. And family counseling? And family counseling. All of us. Including James. James is mortified, Mom. He keeps saying he should have spoken up, should have stopped us." That evening, I sat in my living room, surrounded by the silence that had terrified my children so much. But it wasn't empty silence, it was peaceful silence. The kind Harold and I had shared during our last years together, comfortable and companionable. Mrs. Chen's granddaughter Sarah had gone above and beyond, ensuring that all my belongings were retrieved from Sunset Manor and that the house was fully restored to my control. The new improvements my children had made were actually lovely. I had to admit that Patricia had good taste, even if her methods were criminal. I called Eleanor Martinez to let her know I was home. "Margaret. How did it go today? Let's just say my children learned that their old mother isn't as helpless as they thought." Eleanor laughed. "I'm so proud of you, honey. When do you want me to drive you to get your car back?" My car. Another thing my children had handled for me. Richard had sold it to a used car dealer, claiming I was too dangerous to drive. Another decision made without my consent, another piece of my independence stolen. Sarah is handling that too. Apparently, Richard had no legal authority to sell my car, so that's another layer of fraud we can add to the pile. Good heavens, Margaret. What were they thinking? They were thinking that being old automatically makes you stupid and helpless. They were thinking that loving your children means letting them walk all over you. They were wrong on both counts. After I hung up with Eleanor, I walked through my house, reacquainting myself with every room, every photograph, every memory embedded in these walls. In my bedroom, I found that Patricia had packed away most of Harold's belongings, probably assuming I'd want to move on and forget about my husband of 45 years. I spent an hour putting everything back where it belonged. Harold's reading glasses on his nightstand, his favorite sweater in the closet, his coffee mug in the kitchen cabinet. My children might not understand that grief doesn't have an expiration date, but I wasn't ready to erase Harold from our home. That night, I slept in my own bed for the first time in 3 weeks, surrounded by the sounds of my own house, the old furnace clicking on, the grandfather clock chiming the hours, the familiar creaks and settles of a house that had weathered 50 years of family life. 2 weeks later, I sat in Dr. Amanda Rodriguez's office with my 3 children, feeling like I was chaperoning a field trip to face reality. The family therapist had been Sarah Chen's recommendation, someone who specialized in elder abuse and family reconciliation. "Mrs. Sullivan," Dr. Rodriguez began, "can you tell us how you felt when your children made the decision to move you to Sunset Manor?" I looked at Richard, Patricia, and Michael, these grown adults who suddenly looked like nervous teenagers called to the principal's office. I felt betrayed. I felt like everything I'd sacrificed for them, every year I'd devoted to raising them, meant nothing. I felt like they saw me as a problem to be solved rather than a person to be loved. Patricia flinched. "Mom, that's not." Dr. Rodriguez held up a hand. "Let your mother finish, Patricia." I felt disposable. Like once I was no longer useful to them, no longer cooking their meals when they visited, no longer babysitting their children, no longer able to give them money when they needed it, they were ready to throw me away. Michael was staring at his shoes again, just like he had the day they'd ambushed me in my living room. "Mom, we never thought of you as disposable." "Then why did you dispose of me, Michael?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Dr. Rodriguez let the silence stretch before speaking again. "Richard, you were the primary architect of this plan. Can you help us understand your reasoning?" Richard straightened up, slipping into his lawyer persona. "Dr. Rodriguez, our mother had shown signs of cognitive decline. She was living alone in a large house, she'd had some accidents." "Richard," I interrupted, "we've established that those were lies. I had no cognitive decline. Dr. Williams has confirmed that repeatedly. But you were isolated, Mom. You rarely left the house after Dad died. You weren't taking care of yourself." I was grieving, Richard. I was processing the loss of my husband, my best friend, my partner of 45 years. That's not a mental illness, that's being human. Dr. Rodriguez made a note. "Richard, how did you interpret your mother's grief?" I thought she was giving up. I thought she needed structure, medical supervision, social interaction with people her own age." "And did you discuss these concerns with her directly?" Richard's confidence faltered. "Not exactly. We talked about it among ourselves and decided that direct confrontation would just upset her and make her more resistant to getting help.